I'm live now, so I'm going to see if I can set moderators here. So let me see what my options are and see what I can do as far as that goes. Okay, see what the menu says. Um, yeah, I'm not seeing anything for that, so let's see what this button says here. Hey everybody. What's going on there, Irish? How you doing? Good to see you. Hey Jen, hey baby. Trying to see if I can get this menu to come up for a moderator, and I'm not seeing it. So, see what else there is. Yeah, I don't see it. So, you know what? I don't want to I don't want to interrupt my flow of thought here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to get to the point, and I'm going to pick up where I left off at, and I'll just see what I can do another time, because again, this phone's very primitive. I don't know what the issue is here. But yeah, all right. I'm just going to discuss where I was last time. And where I was last time was that we are seeing events unfold to where essentially we're seeing a bifurcation between the Eastern and Western elitists, these competing mafia syndicates, if you will, like the Genoveses and the Colombo families. You know, that's what it's really like. And of course, in each family, you have your lieutenants and your underbosses and so on and so forth. That would be your banksters and your politicians beneath them, and all the other such industry leaders and every manner of corrupt individual you can imagine. Now, you have to understand that yes, that's exactly right, Irish. It's a mafia. These elites, these satanic elites, are a mafia in the West and in the East. Now, you see two competing streams of thought between them, and you see the West wanting to tear itself apart, but then they get mad when the likes of Russia and China, who have both been around for a very long time and are quite shrewd and quite professional at their games, they know what's going on. They're smarter than these Western leaders are, because those countries didn't exist for so long for them to be dummies, for them to be fools. Just for an example, let me show you this here. Okay, back in 862 AD, the Varangians, near the basically at the end of antiquity, beginning of medieval times, they founded what became modern-day Russia. So then you had Oleg of Novgorod taking Kiev to unite the northern and southern lands of the East Slavs, which became the Russian Empire. So, and that was before the Mongol invasion and everything else had taken place. But then, of course, China is even more ancient. The China we know today essentially was founded by the Qin dynasty, which was the original Emperor Qin of China back in 221 BC, not AD but BC. And they united warring lands and warring factions into one empire, one China. So yeah, you really have things taking shape to where, you have these Western satanic elites full of hubris, full of arrogance, just thinking that, the whole world should have to kiss their ass But in reality, you know, you don't have the East bowing to Western pressures or Western demands. What they did instead, like I said in the last live stream, is they took very much advantage of these Western elites, of their system, and they used it to build themselves up, to steal technology, to build their own industrial bases, their own capabilities, for Russia to revive itself, and for China to grow into the industrial behemoth that it is now. The most powerful, the most mighty industrial nation on the face of the earth in real terms. Okay, China may not be the biggest arms exporter, but they are the biggest arms manufacturer. And the reason why they don't export the majority of their weapons is because they keep them for their freakishly huge paramilitary and regular military, including reserves, which turns out to be nearly 30 million when you add the regular active military of some 4 million to the now 5 million reserves that go with their active military, and then to the 20 million paramilitary forces of the National Militia, combined with the Marine Militia, combined with the National Construction Corps, combined with the PAP, which is the People's Armed Police, combined with the PLA Strategic Reserve, which is considered paramilitary until they're activated and become part of the regular PLA. So you have, which the PLA Strategic Reserve more or less is like just another layer of home defense for China proper. Not for necessarily sending them overseas, although they could if they really wanted to. Like, we never intended to send the National Guard overseas because the National Guard is supposed to be the component of our army kept at home for defense. But we did send them because we had a manpower crisis to fight in Iraq and Afghanistan simultaneously while also being spread out in other parts of the world. You don't understand what a drain on manpower that those two wars were simultaneously going on. But, okay, if you combine Afghanistan and Iraq together, Afghanistan in land mass is about the size of Texas, and Iraq is about the size of California in land mass. But then the populations are about opposite. So you take Afghanistan, who has a California-sized population, and Iraq with a Texas-sized population. So it's like basically, more or less, combining the two states of California and Texas if you had to occupy them. And we needed allies to help us with that. We needed domestic Iraqi puppet regime forces to help us with that. We were spread dangerously thin because we have a very small military for what we asked of it. So China, on the other hand, has this huge, huge military. And they could, not just in theory, but in actuality, they could very easily occupy the United States, especially having had increased their reserves to the number that they have. But again, like I told you in the last live stream, like I've always told you in my numbers and facts and figures and stats videos, China has a freakish number of equipment in storage, okay? It's stuff that is kept readily available for all their paramilitary and reserve units. Not the stuff for their active, which is already active, which their active forces are the biggest in the world. I'm talking about their reserves that go with the active and the paramilitary, which nobody ever counts and really should, because they're all combat grade. They're all militarily trained. They're militarily armed with old surplus equipment that's passed down from their regular professional military. It gets put in storage for use by their paramilitary or their PLA reserves, which are humongous now at 5 million. Just their active PLA is 2.5 million plus in strength. And then you have the rest of their military, the PLAAF, the Strategic Missile Forces, Rocket Forces, and the PLAN, the Navy, all combined is about 4 million. Then you add the 5 million PLA reserves. Then you add the 20 million of their whole paramilitary, and you have a ginormous force, a gargantuan force. They're on another level, conventionally speaking, from everybody else. Yes, wow, indeed. China, let me put it in these terms. When I was young and a teenager, and I first got into studying militaria and war history and current military affairs around the world, this is before I joined the Army as an adult. China used to give me anxiety. They used to give me anxiety because they scared me in the back of my mind because of how big they are. They are so big. They're bigger than the next 20 nations in steel production and in factories. And they're also bigger than the next 20 nations in their armed forces when you're combining paramilitary and reserves to the whole of their armed forces along with their active. They are so big, it's hard to fathom. It's like if you take the state of Texas and put it all under arms, or or something like that. It's literally like taking our second biggest state in population and putting it all under arms. It's that big. I mean, our military, by comparison, we have only now 2.2 million, while China has this freakish armed forces of nearly 30 million. It's 29 something. It's huge. It's huge. And I'm talking all of it. I'm saying they're paramilitary with their reserves and with their active forces, which even their active forces are the biggest on earth at 4 million when you combine all four branches of their military. I'm not even including reserves and their huge paramilitary in that. But when you include reserves and paramilitary, there's just no one that can hold a candle to it. No one. Nobody. So yes, they used to give me anxiety really bad. And I know people are talking about I saw somebody in there, I can't remember who it was in the chat while I tried to refresh it, saying something about Poland getting involved. Look, I don't see that happening unless Poland has a death wish. All these crazy allegations and things that come out in these podcasts that people do, or these news stories that somehow make it into alternative circles and get pushed there too. I just don't see it. I'm not seeing it. Unless Poland has a death wish, they will not do that. Or the only other way they could feasibly do it is if they betrayed NATO and made a deal with Russia. And the only other way they would do it is if they not only made a deal with Russia, because Ukraine's not even allowed to make a deal with Russia, because if they did, these elites have already threatened the likes of Zelensky and told them, and Kolomoisky and all the rest, and told them not to make a deal with Russia. So that's why they haven't. That is why they're steady losing, and that they still haven't come to the peace table yet. So to see Poland doing that would mean that they either made a deal with the Russians or that they have a death wish. Because there is no way on earth that Poland is going to take on Russia. Russia has their technology and their military is on a whole nother level from Poland and from Germany, even from France, from Britain, from Italy. I already showed you by comparison the numbers, and I made sure to have my paper ready with all the facts and figures and stats wrote down on it. In fact, in case I was going to go over these things again, because you know what? Sometimes it's worth reminding folks what is actually what, because people seem to easily forget things that put it all into perspective. Because I really just don't see how Poland is going to do something on their own unless they just either have a death wish or they have made some sort of a deal with Russia which would undermine NATO because, again, the Ukrainians are not even allowed to make deals with Russia. They're not allowed to come to the peace table because America keeps egging this on. So, again, you have Germany, Britain, France, Italy, all combined have 1,146,000 troops, and that's all four of them combined now. And 285,000 of that is paramilitary. Again, all of them combined have 1,135 tanks, 16,000 IFVs and APCs, 11,460 specialty vehicles, armored fighting vehicles like MRAPs and other types of armored specialty vehicles, bridge laying, and so on and so forth, engineering vehicles. You get the picture. They only have 345 towed artillery combined between the four of them, only 376 self-propelled guns, which is artillery that's on a chassis on a vehicle mounted, and 122 rocket artillery. 122 rockets. 376 self-propelled guns, 345 towed. That's horrible. They only have 215 attack helicopters between them. And what is this? This is 1,360 in the other category, like transport and utility helicopters. Now, Russia, for their part, has 3.5 million forces, which includes their reserves and their 300,000 paramilitary forces, because their regular military with reserves is 3.2 million, plus 300,000 paramilitary, like their internal troops, which is like their paramilitary National Guard, like how China has their national militia, which is humongous. They have 12,500 main battle tanks that are available for frontline service, 30,000 IFVs and APCs, 15,000 specialty vehicles, armored fighting vehicles, MRAPs, air defense artillery that's armored, so on and so forth, all that stuff. They have 7,500 towed pieces of artillery, 3,400 rocket artillery pieces, 6,500 self-propelled guns, 1,655 attack helos, including all the stored away Hinds they have that they maintain for their reserves and such, and 1,500 other categories. That there is not one category that Germany, Britain, France, and Italy have combined that even comes near Russia, except for the specialty vehicle category and the other helicopter category. But even then, all four of them combined still don't even equal that. That's ridiculous. So NATO is a joke. It's a joke. And if I were to compare China combined with Russia, combined with their other allies, the West is a laughingstock. It's a paper tiger. So what I'm saying is, I'm saying that all of these issues here are a result of deindustrialization, of these Western elites tearing their own economies, their own industries down, not having sufficient resources, because Russia's doing a pretty damn good job of showing these Western elites that they can have all the fake paper wealth, all the fiat wealth that they think that they have, but fiat wealth and paper doesn't equal power. It doesn't. Commodities equal power. Food equals power. Fuel equals power. Gas equals power. Gold equals power. A damn powerful military equals power, which Russia has the second most powerful conventional military on earth after China. In conventional terms. But Russia has the biggest nuke arsenal on earth. The biggest. We're only number 2 in nukes. And our arsenal's so old, I question if even most of it would work properly, if it had a chance to work. And if China didn't shut it down after hacking solar winds like they did, if China didn't get in there and shut it all down, or use some sort of electronic warfare system as a redundancy that they no doubt got in through ownership of our ports, through ownership of farms and other properties all over our country, or have it somehow hit by Club K systems, which both Russia and China have gotten in by their thousands. So that's another thing. But China has the third biggest nuke arsenal. In realistic terms, it's about 1,000 nukes. Their exact number is a state secret, but on the very high end, it's been estimated at 1,200, and on the very low end, about 400. So I go with the median number, or a little like high median number of about 1,000. And the reason I arrive at that number is because of a few different factors. You have the Chinese adding a bunch of new silos out in Xinjiang in the west that already go with all their silos in Manchuria. And you have also, and in Inner Mongolia too, you also have, that's not the country Mongolia, that's Inner Mongolia, which is a part of northern China. You also have the fissile materials that have been available to China for the last about 30 years. They've had enough to multiply their nuke arsenal by about 2 or 3 times, at least 2 times, but at the most 3 times. That's why the estimates run as high as about 1,200. But I'm going to be more realistic and say it's about 1,000. But 1,000 nukes is nothing to joke about. 1,000 nukes could destroy 2 large countries. It's enough. It's enough. Because even if their arsenal was only 400, that would be enough nukes to destroy this country, or at least destroy enough of it to where this country would never rise from the ashes again, because all its major infrastructure would be decimated. The cities would be decimated. A lot of things that we depend on would be decimated. But again, as I've said before, I don't see them using but a very small handful when they invade us, because China wants us intact. Russia mostly wants us intact because they want to be the premier Arctic Circle power. Russia is already seeing the benefits of what resource control is doing for them. Do you understand that Russia's national debt is only about 150 to 200 billion, with a B, billion, while we, on the other hand, have a national debt that far exceeds our gross domestic product. Which, if you all remember, last summer it was, when I did the video reporting on the actual Fed's own numbers, that our economy had shrunk by 1/3. It shrunk. It used to be about 18 something trillion, nearly 19. So for expediency's sake, we'll round it to 19. It used to be that much. But then after all the you know what happened in 2020 and so on, our economy shrunk because our economy used to be built on small businesses. And we lost 1/3 of our economy then. Can you imagine how much it's contracted now? So if we were once at a 18 or something trillion figure, 19 trillion tops, and it shrunk by 1/3, that would leave us at about 13 or so trillion, 12, 13 trillion. And if it contracted even more, then we're down to about 10 trillion, or about half of what we once were, while China hasn't contracted. Now, what they've done on their ports is they concocted some cockamamie story about shutting down their port infrastructure to trade because of, this whole thing that's been going on. But that's not the real reason why they're doing it, because out of the same side of their mouth, guess what they're doing still? While they shut down the ports, they did not shut down production lines. They did not shut down production. They have not. Their factories are still churning out new helicopters, new tanks, new jets. They have the crown jewels of everything that the West ever had to offer them. And they're so good at reverse engineering, and then not just reverse engineering and making their own, but improving on the designs. Improving. And when they don't improve on the design, they figure out a countermeasure for what we have, when it comes to developing new types of missiles and targeting radars and so on and so forth. Electronic jamming, because they know what freaks we're on, what frequencies we use, and just everything. The whole gamut of things. So, yes, China and Russia also share technology as well. So what one has, you can reasonably expect the other to have as well. And China has a very powerful, as I said last time, very robust high technology sector. They have developed their own indigenous capabilities. So when you see these, pardon the term, but when you see these dipshits, these Western leaders, these Western elites, when you see them thinking that they're all high and mighty, but then you see them visibly frustrated that their sanctions have done nothing but hurt them and embarrassed them, then you know that there's a bifurcation going on. Back to where I started this stream at, was with the bifurcation. The Genoveses are at war with the Colombo family. This is a mafia bifurcation. The East and the West. They are not a unified front. I understand that we're on the peon level insofar as, our status, our wealth, whatever. If you believe in Yeshua Messiah, then none of that matters anyway. We're not peons. We're heirs to a kingdom, the greatest kingdom in all existence, the kingdom of heaven. But, to them, to these satanic elite scumbags, they think they're on their high horse and they're high and mighty and that they have all this power, but they really don't. They really don't. They're not going to make Russia or China bow down to them. In fact, it'll be the other way around, because while these Western elites were busy tearing apart their own power base, which is imbecilic, stupid, who's going to protect them? They will have no more chips on the table because they destroyed their own economies, they destroyed their own militaries. What will be left for them? You can best believe that when we get invaded, you are going to see many of these leaders, these so-called Western elites. You're going to see them shamed and humiliated by the Chinese, by the Russians. Do you think they honestly believe, this is how funny it is, you guys, they honestly believe that they're going to ride off into the sunset with everything they stole. They seriously believe it. They don't know how the CCP regime mind operates. They don't know how the Russian political oligarchy operates, how all these other elites of the East operate. They do not understand them or how they think or do things. They think, you see, the Eastern mindset is totally different from the Western mindset of things, okay? They think, honestly, that they're going to ride off into the sunset to their little mansions they bought in these other countries, and they think they're going to get away from it all. Or they think they're going to go underground and get away from it all. But they're not. They're so stupid and delusional. They think that they're going to escape all the issues they created for themselves. You can run but you damn sure can't hide, especially when you've got the Chinese and Russian militaries looking for you, because it's much the same as, we can look at the Eastern mindset as far back as the 40s. When the Soviet Union defeated Nazi Germany, they humiliated the Germans by having them march through Red Square as a form of humiliation. And that's pretty tame compared to what they're going to do this time to these Western elites. Okay? I think you know what I'm saying. They, especially the Chinese, they have some grimy methods about how they deal with their enemies. I'll just put it that way. And every bit as brutal as the Italian mob is to their rivals, it'll be much worse coming from the likes of the CCP. Now, if you've ever watched mob movies from back in the day, you see how they put their rivals' heads in vice clamps and they break their knees and put them in the ocean with cement shoes and, swimming with the fishes, or make them eat glass and things like that. Horrible ways to do in their rivals. Well, imagine what the CCP and the likes of the PAP will do, which I say is the new Waffen SS, like the old SS. Imagine how brutal they will be. In fact, the Eastern mindset is so against what these Western elites even do, how they manage things. They are going to make examples of those types of people. You can best believe it. If you look at Schwab, and you can't imagine Schwab or his ilk inside of a camp breaking big rocks into small rocks and other forms of humiliation, and worse even, then I don't know what to tell you, because it's not even outside the realm of possibility at all once you understand how these people really think. If you watch a mob movie, you can see how these mobsters conspire against each other, but yet they will go and have a sit down with each other, a sit down meeting. They'll literally go meet with each other, negotiate, and do business deals. Well, what do people think that the last, several decades or more was? What do people think that was? The fragile peace that we've all enjoyed growing up in, living in, is about to end. Because these sit-down meetings don't happen when mafia syndicates go to war. That's as true in the criminal realm as it is on the global stage. So people that falsely believe that these Western elites have all the power, they really don't, because they put themselves into a position where they don't. Look at them. They think that their paper signifies power, but it doesn't. Look who has the real power. It's he who controls assets, hard assets, like Russia, like China, who actually produces things, who has hoarded and stockpiled gold to the rafters. Russia and China built crash-proof fortresses out of gold while they laugh at the West as it's falling apart. I mean, it's painfully evident. If people don't see that, they're blind. They're freaking blind. I don't know what else to tell people. I mean, it is so painfully apparent what's going on. And people pretend like it's just a great No, the Great Reset is a Western thing. It doesn't affect China. It doesn't affect Russia. Those are age-old empires that have been around since long before the West even became conceived of and became a bloc. They didn't outlast wars and famines and pestilences and turmoil and everything that they've outlasted. They didn't do that by being weak, by being stupid. They did that by being shrewd, with cunning, with raw power. They survived all these things. And if you look at the rest of the Eastern world, when you had Western colonization going on, guess who never did get colonized? China didn't, nor did Russia. They survived and thrived at the end of the 20th century, minus the 1990s. The 90s for Russia was a very hard time, but you can best believe that they didn't forget about the 90s and that they will never want to return to that, because they know that's what it would bring for them to align themselves with these Western elites. So when you see the likes of Schwab talking to Putin, do you really think Schwab, this German, this LARPer German that pretends he's a Star Wars character, do you think that Schwab realistically has a sway over Putin, who is a spy by nature, by craft, by trade? He is a KGB man, through and through. He is a spy. If you don't think that he was in the World Economic Forum to find out what their real intentions were to use it against them, like he's doing now with the sanctions, then you're horribly blind. Because Putin is a separate entity from the Western elites. Look, they're all evil. The Eastern elites, the Russian political oligarchy class, the Chi-Com CCP are evil. Like, you don't even know how evil they are. But these Western satanic elites are also evil. They're all equally evil. But one is more imbecilic than the other and is being offered up as a sacrifice because the Western elites think that they can tear themselves down for some, crack pipe induced idea of a great reset, and still think that they can handle the likes of the East that never played their game. I don't see how they think that. I mean, they're crazy. I mean, Satan eats his own. We know that Satan eats his own. So, in this case, it's going to be the East gobbling up the West as the West decays, falls apart, and becomes prey. Easy prey. Again, like in the last live stream, I told everybody about all the various facts and figures and stats about how the rise of China occurred and about how Russia revived itself and how we have declined. The nexus point where we were on our descent and they were on their ascension was back in 2017-ish, about 2018. They became strong enough to be equal to us in that time. But now they've surpassed us 5 years later. It's 5 years later. Nothing ever stays the same. Americans delude themselves oftentimes into thinking that, we'll always be number one in this or in that or blah, blah, blah. No, you have to maintain it. You have to maintain a position to stay in a certain way. We have not maintained our position worth a damn. We have been falling apart at the seams. We are insanely weak right now. And to make matters worse, we're sending arms to places that really we don't need to be sending them to, because we're going to need them here. And we already have limited resources in all categories. They've tapped into our strategic reserve, for God's sake, and they've sold it to China, to India. Now they're trying to use it to help Europe too. Well, what happens when we're out of these resources? Guess what happens? We no longer can produce. We cannot produce our own food. We cannot produce arms or armaments. We still can't even replace everything we're sending out anyway, because China shut down trade to us. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. China shut down trade, and basically it's just where it is right now, to the point where we're sending out, not getting replaced, and That's all deliberately done. The East is literally sucking up everything we've ever had. Not just our fuel, but now our arms, because our arms are being used to try to combat them through a proxy who's failing, who's utterly failing against 70 battalions. Some 70 battalions, a very small force of some 60-something thousand, 63, 4, 5 odd thousand troops is inside that Eastern European country, grinding down their armed forces, grinding them into dust. So, yeah, I just don't know how people don't see it all. It's right there, plain to see. And if you all remember, before all this even began, I told everybody, I told them exactly what this was. I told them from the start that this is a distraction tantamount to the level of George Patton's Third Army. Not his Third Army, his inflatable dummy army in southeast England. So, hold on a second. Yeah, somebody said they got kicked out. I don't know what to do about that other than to tell them to get back in. But anyways, where was I? All right, anyway. Yeah, it's tantamount to George Patton's dummy inflatable army in southeast England to trick the Nazis into believing that the landings would be in the Pas de Calais instead of Normandy. So that's what this Ukraine thing is. It's a form of a distraction, but it's got a lot of dynamics to it. It's really not any one thing. It's not a cut and dry thing. But again, as I've said before it even began, you are going to see it to where there's going to be multiple theaters of war opening up before we even get invaded. You're going to see multiple theaters open up. It's not going to end in Eastern Europe. So, sorry, I keep getting texts. Anyways, it's not going to end in just that country. It's not going to end with that. They are going to divvy up our forces so very small that they're going to be isolated and trapped in little tiny pockets and crushed, ground into dust. So people don't understand it, but when you have to divvy up your forces to where they have to contend with Iran, with Syria, with Pakistan potentially, with because if it's not over there, it'll be here, because I'm sure there's plenty of of their troops inside our country too, because they're one of China's chief allies, with North Korea, with Belarus, with Russia, with China. And there's different places where theaters can open that are even more diverse than just Southwest and Southeast Asia. There could be a theater of war in Oceania. You could have Australia or New Zealand invaded. You never know. I mean, it's not like those countries would be hard to overrun at all. I mean, their populations are not armed. They're not trained. Their military's puny. I mean, their whole military is basically the size of one large PLA group army. And China has many dozens of group armies. When you look at their reserves included, their regular active military, they have many dozens of group armies. And not only that, but you have the PAP with their first and second mobile contingent, and their other contingents for home duty, I guess you could call it, like their domestic duties. You could have all these paramilitary and military forces tackling multiple theaters, or at least bolstering them, like how the Chinese have 50,000 troops in Iran even right now as I'm speaking. China and Iran did a defense deal a while ago, as did Russia, who also has assets there. Russia has assets in Venezuela, in Cuba. So, yeah, you have all kinds of things going on. You have all kinds of places. China has bases too. They essentially own the Panama Canal zone, more or less. So they run the Panama Canal. That's a strategic choke point. let's see. They have a Bahamas base because they run a lot of the ports in Bahamas. You best believe they do. They also have bases, legal military bases in Canada. They also have more clandestine bases in Mexico. They have plenty of clandestine bases in America, because here is where I go into explaining what the civil military fusion policy is and what it means. The civil military fusion policy, in a nutshell, is basically China makes it to where anything of a civilian use can be converted into military use. That applies to vehicles, it applies to ships, it applies to property. So under the civil military fusion policy, barracks, houses become barracks. Apartment blocks that they own can become barracks. Farms can become combat outposts or FOBs. Warehouses become storage depots. Same with farms, solar farms, wind farms, and many of them are located outside of major American installations. So they've got air defense assets hidden up in there, and other things. So, I mean, they have spent so much time, as I've explained in very old material of mine, in all my documentaries, everything. They have imported thousands of Club K systems into this country, which are the Caliber cruise missile systems. There's 4 in each container, and a Caliber cruise missile system has quite a decent range on it. So if you have these sitting in cargo yards, you have these sitting in ports, you have these sitting in farms, they could be anywhere. You could have them all pop up at any given moment, like during the invasion in my scenarios. And they can just lob salvo after salvo of these things on precision strikes, because calibers are very accurate. Plus, they're faster than the Tomahawk. So you could have all that going on. You could have. Sorry, I'm smoking a cigarette. You could have it to where entire tank battalions roll out of farms that were hidden in pole barns or in regular barns or in other portable storage buildings or assemblies. You could have them inside of warehouses. You could have them in any number of disguised locations. If you think that in the last 20 years, since they've owned our ports, huge ports even, like Long Beach, what my favorite example, because it's our biggest West Coast port, you can easily see how they could be shipping assets all over this nation. It's not hard. All they have to do is contract their own trucking companies or their own independent drivers that have allegiances with the CCP or other foreign regimes that are with China, and you have them transport entire units and their logistical capabilities. Wham, bam, there you go. Now you have foreign units all over the nation, and there's nothing anybody can do about it. Nothing. Because these political parasites of the West are glad to take money from China and are glad to look the other way. And this problem will never get fixed. And this is why it's so dangerous, what's being done to us. We have no defense against this. None whatsoever. So, we are in quite a predicament overall. Very, very dangerous. So, now you have all these things lining up. You have it to where the most powerful conventional military power on the face of the earth, China, and the second biggest, Russia, and also the first biggest nuke arsenal, Russia, and third biggest, China. And the most technologically advanced nations, both Russia and China. The wealthiest nations, both Russia and China. The biggest industrial power that the world has ever known, which is China. People talk a lot about what the Soviet Union could do and produce, militarily speaking. I'm sorry, but the Soviet Union back then has nothing on what China is today. They didn't even have close to the number of factories that China has. China has a bigger armed forces than the Soviet Union ever had, ever. China has nearly 30 million under arms with their paramilitary, their reserves, and their active military forces. So, All that said, you basically have it to where the Soviet Union, even then, is not the threat that China is today, and Russia has revived itself to a point to where it even rivals what it was during the Soviet Union. Well, actually, it surpassed it because the level of technology that Russia has now is much greater than what the Soviet Union even had in the 80s. So, we're in a much more dangerous world now, everybody, and people need to acknowledge that. People have to acknowledge it because we're in a very, very, very perilous time for this country. And, you know, I'm not pro Babylon, not by any stretch of the imagination. I'm not pro Chinese and Russian. I'm just warning about them because they're very dangerous. And I live here, okay? So because I live here, naturally, I have to be concerned about where I live. I have a son, and I don't want my son to grow up in an environment like I lived in Iraq, but worse. A war-torn country that basically is, oh, you're talking about, I see you in the chat. Are you talking about that Chinese guy? It's probably a Chinese MSS agent or shill or something that didn't like me talking about how dangerous they are. But anyway, yeah, I wouldn't worry about it. Just boot him out. But yeah. Anyway, we live in a time now to where things are actually more dangerous than they ever were, even at the highest point in the Cold War. And that's not because of predominantly nukes. It's because our enemies are literally preparing for the takedown. They're preparing to storm us and capture this place. And I've told you all what will lead up to that. We will have a Syrian-style internal conflict that'll weaken us so much so that it'll basically be a mop-up operation when they come in here finally. They want it to be so easy that they really won't have any real losses to an invasion of this place. Well, what better to weaken us even further, okay, than we already are without resources and everything else, than to have us bicker and fight, and squabble over what very few precious resources remain, including food, what very, very small amount of fuel will remain, and we are getting to a point to where fuel will be so expensive that you'll have to be rich to be able to travel. That's the way these Western elites want it. But, yes. So that guy's I'm sure that guy is a Chinese bot or a Chi-Com MSS operative or something, because I've been attacked by Chi-Com shills before who don't like what I have to say at all. They hate that I'm revealing their real, actual hybrid war plans and everything else. That's, they sit on the board of all major American corporations. So basically what that means is that they have a big say in how all American corporations operate because they sit on these boards. So that means a company like YouTube has adopted Chi-Com level censorship, or very close to it at least, for what they can get away with. And they want to censor anybody that criticizes the CCP or that talks about their actual plans like I do. So their goal is to keep people like me from being able to speak. So yeah, they're going to interfere. And I'm sorry about the whole mod thing. It's just not showing me any options on the screen. I clicked on every single button and there's no options for a mod. So yeah, I don't know what to do about that at the moment. It's the options that I looked up. I guess they're only available if you have a computer or something. I mean, I don't know. I'm really just glad I can go live at all. So I'm going to count my blessings on that. But I'll keep trying. I'll get better at it. I'm sure I'll get better at it. But, I did this tonight as a monologue most of all, more than anything, because I felt like there was still plenty I could have added to the last conversation on the last live. So I'm going to keep going, and I'm going to continue to add to it by saying that, yes, there will be an internal Syrian style thing. And that baby formula issue is not the be all end all. There will be worse to come. There will be much worse to come. It won't just be the formula. It'll be all kinds of foods that people depend on just for day-to-day survival. Besides just baby formula, you're going to see, I predict that, you're going to see Gerber and everything else run out too. You're going to see, what you see on the shelves, basically, I'm going to put it like this. That's the last of the stock. When those shelves are gone, it's not going to come back. It's not coming back. And another thing that contributes to it not coming back is the fuel situation. If truckers can't afford the fuel, then the food won't ever be delivered, and even what little bit will trickle out is not going to be enough to satiate the masses, to keep the masses satisfied and well fed. People are going to starve here. People are going to starve. And that is what is going to cause people to have this internal Syrian-style conflict. It's not just going to be that. It's also going to be many, many other issues that contribute to it. Like you're going to see all the overreach, and you all know what I mean. All the overreach is going to lead to a boiling point when you combine it with no more fuel, no more food, no more abilities to go out and earn an income, a living. You're going to see it boil over because people are going to have it above their heads to boiling point. It's going to boil over, and people are going to click up into factions just like in Syria, and you're going to see spontaneous eruptions of all kind of madness in this country, and like you can't even imagine. All these social issues that people talk about today, that'll all be gone. That'll all be gone when people are starving, because people won't have the luxuries they're accustomed to be able to indulge in perverted lifestyles and everything else, because it's part of their judgment to get them to turn from it, because they're going to be smited with no food, no transit, because they were fooling around and they didn't prep like preppers do. They were fooling around. They were living in their fool's paradise, and it's all going to get yanked away from them. I use this analogy for it a lot. It's the same concept as if you have somebody get a brand new car, a brand spanking new whatever. Pick your favorite vehicle. Somebody gets a brand new car. They start driving it for about a month, and they become really accustomed to it. And then all of a sudden, it's gone. It's just gone. Like it's yanked away from them. There's something that they were so accustomed to that they loved was yanked away from them. Well, what did people here love? They loved that easy life. They loved the easy Western way of life. And when the Western way of life is yanked away from them, because yet another thing that'll contribute to it, we already see the slow grinding on the petrodollar, but at one point, something like Sandman, which I believe is real, is going to happen. They're already setting up for it to happen, incrementally. But then there's going to come a point where everybody is in a position to where they're totally disconnected from it, and it doesn't matter if they dump it or keep it or what. You're going to get to a point to where it'll actually be not just feasible, but it'll be better for them to dump it, but they're setting themselves up. They're maneuvering themselves into position for it. You already see Saudi Arabia starting to set up a petro-yuan with Red China. That's one part of it. So they're going to be dumping the dollar in exchange for the true superpower's currency, the Chinese yuan renminbi, which is China's money. So they're incrementally getting rid of the dollar to set up for the day that they can unilaterally just dump it with everybody else. Everybody right now is maneuvering themselves into a position to where they can not only do it, but that it'll be advantageous to them when they do it. So, yes, when the entire financial system, our industrial system's already deindustrialized. We don't produce anything near what we once did, and that's not just militarily. That's in consumer goods, everything. We are so deindustrialized that it's getting to a point to where, there's no way to sustain it when you don't have the resources, raw materials, the investment, because the more worthless our money becomes because of the incremental dumping of it that's going on already, the more it'll come to its natural conclusion, to where everybody does dump it all at the same time. Whatever's left of it that they're still holding, they will dump all at the same time. Because by then it'll be advantageous because by then they would have all gotten off the Western system, the petrodollar system, And you see, Europe, who's caught in the middle of everything, they're really suffering right now because they're solely dependent on exporting finished goods. And because the sanctions boomeranged around them and they can't get the fuel, the natural gas and everything else they depend on to power their factories, their economies, they're not going to produce nearly as many finished goods as they once did either. So the end result is going to be that they're going to be exporting less, meaning they're going to take in less money, meaning that their people are not going to be able to make a living, meaning that, their whole ways of life and system is going to collapse because they're not going to have anything to show for anything they've done. They're not going to have resources and commodities. They're not going to be able to sell any finished goods because their factories it won't be possible for their factories to have the output. China and Russia don't need the West, but the West sure needs them, because globalism is what set the West up for an epic failure in the first place. That is how China became the industrial superpower, the military superpower that they are, and the gold-holding superpower, the economic behemoth. That's how China became what they are. And Russia is not only resurgent, they're actually experiencing economic growth in this time. So yeah, how did those sanctions work out? People try to spin it like it's all about the Great Reset, but that's not exactly right. I mean, it might be for the West, but it's not for Russia. It's not for China. They're not being torn down. They're being built up. But we're being torn down. So then people try to spin it like it's all about the Great Reset and blah blah blah. But I mean, is it really? I mean, maybe that was their intention, but they wanted it to be something that would be worldwide, and it's obviously not, because you see China and Russia returning to a world of hard assets, meaning goods, meaning resources, meaning manufacturing and the ability to produce, whereas the West is built on funny money and Ponzi schemes and government welfare and printing presses. I mean, that's our whole economy is a fraud. It's a fraud. Our enemies built themselves up to a much larger level than we are. I mean, it's ridiculous where they've taken us, these elites. So we're literally being attacked by the Western satanic elites, the Genovese crime family, but also by the Colombo family, which is the Eastern elites, the likes of the CCP, who have always hated us. I showed you all the types of propaganda that the Chinese used to put out. As soon as China became a communist country, the resentment, the hatred that they have for us. While they smiled in our face, oh, they want to take our place, backstabbers, backstabbers. Y'all ever hear that song? Smile in your face, always want to take your place, those backstabbers, backstabbers. Sorry, that's my attempt to sing. That's like an old school. I don't know what you would consider that genre, but I guess I don't know. I guess it's funk music or something. It's like I think it's like 70s. But yeah. Anyway, I just want everyone to understand that they're not playing the game that people thought that they were. That, people thought that, these Western elites control the whole world. They don't. They really don't. You know? Again, different mafia sets. The Colombos and the Genoveses, but the Genoveses are tearing down. It's like the Genoveses, if it was a mafia comparison, it's like the Genoveses burned down all their bistros and their businesses where they launder all their money. But the Colombos built up some new nightclubs and added businesses. Do you understand what I'm saying? What I'm getting at? I'm saying that basically, if it was a mafia comparison to what these elites are doing, the West has burnt down all their own businesses while the East added more to their what they already had. So on a world stage affair, that is like basically, and that concept going for the West is the West destroyed and deindustrialized itself and its own militaries and made them woke and wimpy and pathetic and weak. And didn't invest in key areas of technology, while the East did the exact opposite. The Colombos, they built themselves up. So, the CCP in this case, the Russians. So, I don't want to ramble on forever. I don't know if people are getting bored with me or what, but I just felt the need to put everything in perspective like I always do with always with solid information, always with facts, because I pay attention and research this stuff non-stop. That's all I do. All right? It's all I do. So, I don't know why more people aren't seeing these things, because it's self-evident to the point to where everybody should be seeing it and at least, trying to see it, so that way they can acknowledge it, because the sooner they can acknowledge it, the sooner they can understand what they need to do to navigate it. That was the whole purpose behind those community tab stories I wrote, behind those documentaries I made. And I have a whole playlist out there, if you all are interested, called Important Things Relating to China and USA. I mean, there's stuff in there about Russia too, but it's mostly about China and USA. That has a lot of stuff, a lot of good material in it, solid material that can really educate you about everything that's really happening. Because it's not a cut and dry thing like people try to say. They think the World Economic Forum runs the world when it doesn't. They think all these tacky, kooky, crazy things that all these different sources, alleged sources, put out about stuff that isn't true or is only partially true, but it's not the whole story. And then you have a whole bunch of misguided people. You have to understand, when it comes to PSYOPs, there's a lot of and disinfo out there that's purposely meant to mislead people. That's why in the last live stream I did, I said to everybody, and my friends included, if you want to read news stories, do a lot of background digging so that you can validate them and use God-given discernment. Discernment. Because a lot of stuff anymore that's out on these sources and news media stations is a bunch of bullshit. I mean, let's be honest. Let's be honest. I mean, we're in a time of war. I mean, even though it's a limited incursion, the West is trying to turn it into something that it wants to see grow. It wants to see it grow into a war, because I guess that they think they're going to make money off of it and ride off into the sunset, like I said earlier, but they're not. They will not. They're not going to get away with all the things they're doing. Like I said, Satan eats his own. These Eastern elites and Western elites are both very evil sets of criminals. But the Eastern elites are not stupid. They're in it to win it, while the West thinks that they're going to make as much money as possible and be the gatekeepers of some new society, some new fourth industrial revolution, which is all bullshit because it's not going to happen that way. Even the Bible tells us that it's not going to happen the way that they're trying to purport it to be happening in the news. It's not going to happen like that. Guess what? Even when there is a media source, even when there's a news media source or an alternative media source that makes a bunch of claims about how the Great Reset's going to be, we even know from the Bible that it's not going to be so smooth, because the Bible talks about how wars will continue all through the end times, and that the 10 kings who rule the world give all their power and authority to the beast, but it's only for an hour. And an hour in biblical time, it's not a literal hour per se, but it's not a very long time. So they're saying there's only going to be even this unity of one world anything for they're only going to reign together with the beast for 1 hour before it all falls apart. And then there's going to be constant wars. The wrath of God comes down. But you know, I know a lot about my Bible, but I'm not going to go and quote it because, you know, I have to go dig it out and then I have to find the specific passages. But if you are interested in any of my Bible stuff, then I would suggest you go and watch my 3 Jeremiah 50:51 videos that explain how hybrid warfare is even described in the Bible. About it, how it's going to happen to Mystery Babylon USA. That's in the Bible. A 2,000-plus-year-old book. It's God's Word. And God's Word is eternal. So, I mean, it doesn't matter that it's that old, but what I'm saying about the age is even back then, they described hybrid warfare without knowing the modern-day term for it. But they sure do describe it very, very well in those 2 chapters. And I also cover a lot of self-defense stuff because I don't believe that Christianity is supposed to be some timid, some cowardly belief system. No, not at all. In fact, I don't think Yeshua is a pacifist per se. I think Yeshua supports self-defense because even he says that you need to sell your cloak and buy a sword if you don't have one. And 2 swords is enough. Well, swords aren't used to spread hummus or to spread butter or whatever else. I mean, that is something that you carry for defensive purposes. Well, the modern day equivalent to a sword is a gun. So I think everybody should be preparing to defend themselves. And there is plenty of self-defense examples all throughout the Bible. And I would say that God never changes. So you either believe the whole Bible or you don't believe any of it, because God never changes. Because if he changed, then he wouldn't be God, would he? No. So God never changes. God is the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow. So if God has examples of self-defense in the Bible, then that means that that's always applicable. God doesn't want you to be somebody's doormat. You have even the Son of God, Yeshua Messiah himself, telling you to buy a sword. The disciples carried swords. The only reason why Yeshua healed the ear of that guard that accosted him and took him away to be sacrificed is because he knew it was his time. Prophetically speaking, it was his time to be a sacrifice for the sins of man, but he had a special mission. That's not our mission. We're not here to die for other men. No, we're here because God gives us all different assignments, different purposes. So we should always be ready to defend ourselves. Now remember, self-defense and naked aggression are two entirely different things. Aggression is a sin. Naked aggression is a sin, where you just go after somebody just because, or because you have, or because you're motivated by greed or some other sin. But self-defense is standing up to evil. It is squaring evil in the face, staring it in the face and squaring up against it and hopefully defeating it. So, when people say all this stuff about, there's so many mistaught verses, it's ridiculous. And people like to cherry pick verses and they don't read the whole story to get the proper context. Like the people that often try to say this, live by the sword, perish by the sword. That's not about people defending themselves. That's about murderers and thieves being killed. Who these people live by the sword. They're literally living by the sword to do their sins. That's about them being killed by those who defend themselves, which is a God-given right. So, I'm tired of hearing people try to come up with excuses for why they're weak and try to cherry pick verses to try to back that up. No, God doesn't want weak men, and cowards will not see heaven. That's sure in Revelation. God hates a coward. So, if you're an able-bodied man, then you better be willing to defend yourself. There's no excuse. None. Zero. So I just thought I'd throw that in there before I ended the stream tonight. But I think I've rambled on long enough. And I hope that this was a good stream, and I hope this sort of added to the last one. I didn't really get to go into China a whole lot like I wanted to, but I'll save that for tomorrow night, because tomorrow night's going to be my 2-hour show. But this one went on longer than I even wanted it to. But I love everybody. I'm glad you all came. And I guess I'll see everybody tomorrow night if you feel like coming. All right, you all have a blessed night.